Morning everyone! Today we're reading chapter 7, which is called The Witch in the Woods. It was very hard for the little rabbits to go back out into the winter forest. What little warmth they had gained from Redwater Warren soon vanished, and this time they had no idea where to run. As far as they knew, the whole world was against them, and nowhere was safe. They knew they didn't have much of a head start either. The Gorm would be arriving at Redwater soon, and in 5 short minutes they would discover Podkin's severed ear. After that, they simply had to stroll along the trail of footprints in the snow, and then it would be all over in the flash of a twisted iron blade. Podkin wasn't too worried by it all. He had lost quite a lot of blood, which tended to make you dizzy and dozy. He was currently dreaming that he was walking on top of a fluffy white cloud. His sister was there, carrying a talking carrot that looked a lot like his brother Pook, and for some reason his ear was very sore. He thought he'd probably wake up soon, then go out and see if he could find a nice spot by the river for a snooze. Paz dragged him along by the arm, casting worried glances at his missing ear. The wound was still oozing blood, and the fur on his head was thickly matted with it. She needed to stop and bind it, but there wasn't time. Pook had also started shivering again. He was making quiet, miserable little whines, and she wasn't sure how much of the cold he could take. She was trying her hardest to move quickly, not to leave such obvious tracks, to keep to the deeper parts of the wood. And in all, she'd begun to think it might be better if the Gorm did get them. At least it would all be over quickly, which is why she wasn't too surprised when they stepped into a clearing and saw a hunched, twisted crow sitting on a tree stump and staring at them with blank red eyes. "Oh no," she moaned. "Oh no!" The crow blinked and tilted its spiked metal head. Its beak opened slightly, dripping some oil, coppery fluids. Its feathers rattled and scraped against each other, giving off a cloud of powdery orange rust. Paz tried to think of some way to stop it before it flew off and betrayed their whereabouts. Throw the dagger at it? Jump on top of the thing and squash it? There was really nothing she could do. "Gah!" it squawked and began to spread its wings for takeoff, when suddenly it exploded with a clang and a puff of iron feathers. Paz shrieked and stared at the drifting cloud of jagged plumage. The crow itself had been knocked to the floor, stone dead. "I hate those pesky birds," said someone on the other side of the clearing. Paz raised the dagger, ready to defend herself as a stooped old she-rabbit in a patched cloak crunched towards them through the snow. Her hand clutched a leather sling, empty now of its pebble bullet. "They should learn to mind their own beeswax." "Hello?" said Paz. "Is it morning yet, Mummy?" said Podkin. "Soup," said Pook. "It's about time you 3 showed up," the she-rabbit said. "I've been waiting about in the snow for ages. Blooming cold, my poor feet are." You've been expecting us?" Now Paz wasn't sure if she was dreaming, or was it another agent of the Gorm. She didn't have any metal shards poking out of her face, but still. "Expecting you, dear? I should say so. Saw it in the bones years ago, and now we'd better hurry and see to that ear. We'll lose him if we don't, and then we'll lose everything else." Paz looked at her poor suffering brother and then stared at the old rabbit, trying to work out whether to trust her or not. She was clearly mad, but was she a safer bet than trying to escape the Gorm on their own? The she-rabbit stared back with piercing blue eyes that looked much younger than her face. Her nose wrinkled and twitched as she waited for Paz to make her decision. Finally, she nodded. "All right, we'll come with you, but if you try to trick us—" Paz had Starclaw clutched in one hand. It would cut through the rabbit's flesh. Just like it had Podkin's ear. Then the she-rabbit nodded, as if satisfied that things were going to plan. "Good, good. Just what you're supposed to say, dear." She walked to the edge of the clearing, and then paused to draw a bronze sickle from her belt. Bending down, she started cutting a slender pine sapling with it. While she was busy, 1,000 thoughts raced through Paz's mind. What if she's a traitor like Lady Russet? What if she's a witch? Don't you remember what happens to little rabbits that go off with witches in the forest? The she-rabbit finished cutting off the sapling and used it like a broom to swish away their footprints in the snow. When she had finished, she looked up, an impatient frown on her face. "Well, are you coming or not?" she said. "Hop along, my little bunnies." Then she turned and vanished into the undergrowth. Witch or not, there wasn't much else Paz could do but follow. They wound their way through the bushes and trees, Podkin moaning softly and stopping every now and then for the she-rabbit to hide their tracks, until they came to the biggest oak tree that Paz had ever seen. It had a cascade of gnarled, squirming roots that spilled down from a sloped bank of earth. The towering trunk was thick enough to be 4 or 5 centuries old, and its branches, weighed down with snow, dipped to the forest floor, making a kind of lattice-work cave. A cage of wood and snow that, in a happier time, would have made an amazing play-den. However, it wouldn't be much good at keeping out the Gorm. Paz watched as the she-rabbit ducked through the branches, hoping she had a better plan than just hiding amongst the tangles of roots. Instead, she pushed at a spot on the packed earth of the bank. It looked like a bare patch of mud covered in moss, lichen and dead leaves, but to Paz's surprise it swung open to reveal a hidden door. She hurried inside, helping the bleary Podkin along. As soon as they were in, the old rabbit shut the door and bolted it. "This is it," thought Paz. "This is when the witch makes us into a pie, or maybe some kind of casserole." But no such thing happened. Instead, the she-rabbit hung up her cloak and busied herself by stoking the fire inside a little clay stove. She put a pot on top and poured in water from a clay pitcher, before taking Podkin's hand and leading him to sit on a little stool by the hearth. Paz couldn't help worrying that the warming stove might be intended for them, but seeing as they weren't being eaten just yet, she took the chance to look around. They were in a tiny little house, burrowed beneath the huge roots of the oak. The earth between them had been whitewashed, and reed mats covered the floor. Pots, pans and utensils hung from the ceiling, and there was a small fireplace, complete with mantelpiece, where the stove nestled. Shelves had been carved into the earth of the walls, and more had been added, made from warped planks of wood. Every inch of these were packed with a strange collection of items, too many for Paz to really take in. She saw lots of clay pots and jars, all labelled with neat Ogham writing, some overflowing with dried herbs and bulbs, wild garlic, rosemary, foxglove, rosehip, and lots of mushrooms, like incap, blusher, penny bun, brittlegill, and angel's bonnet. Paz saw many other stranger things that she could only wonder about. A glass jar filled with bird skulls, a painted wooden mask with fangs and huge eyes, a clay model of a peaceful rabbit sitting cross-legged, from whose head a spiral of scented smoke slowly uncurled. So this is what a witch has in her house, she thought. But there were other, more homely things too. A bed in the corner, a spinning wheel, loom, and some cupboards. There was even a leaded glass window frame by the tree roots. Paz went over and peered outside. What she saw made her clap her hands over her mouth to stop her from screaming. A pack of Gorm riders were a few metres away, grinding their way through the snow. Their hunched iron beasts were ploughing up the ground, spattering it with black oil, while their riders sat atop, slowly turning their heads this way and that. Their jagged serrated swords twitched, hungry for rabbit flesh. She could hear the screeching and grating of metal. She could smell the hot oil and burnt blood stink. Any moment now, they would spot the secret door and come crashing through. "Don't you worry about them," said the she-rabbit, as she took the water from the stove and set it down beside Podkin. "They won't find us here. There's enough glamours and enchantments about this place that Herne himself couldn't find it if I didn't want him to." And true enough, now the Gorm were turning their mounts and seemed to be heading off towards the far end of the bank and away. "Proper magic," a little voice in Paz's head had said. "Not only a witch, but a good one." She smiled to herself and went over to where Podkin was sitting. "This is nasty," said the she-rabbit. "Going to need stitches." She had a blunt, matter-of-fact way about her that Paz found reassuring somehow. She clearly knew what she was doing. "Will it be all right?" Paz asked. "As right as a one-eared rabbit can be. Still, it'll do him a favour in the long run. Nobody'd be interested in telling stories about a normal rabbit." Stories? The long run? What was she talking about? As Paz watched, the old rabbit gave Podkin something to drink that sent him to sleep. They moved him over to the bed and then cleaned the wound with warm water. The she-rabbit stitched it with a bone needle and thread before putting on a poultice and binding it tight. She spoke as she worked, and Paz discovered her name was Brigid, that she lived in the woods alone, foraging for food, herbs, and anything else she needed. She didn't say, but Paz guessed she'd been living under the oak tree for a long time, long enough to lose the knack of talking to others. Social skills were very important for Warren Rabbits, but Paz guessed you didn't need them when the only person you had to worry about pleasing was yourself. As soon as Podkin was quietly sleeping, Bridget made some stinging nettle broth, which Pook gulped down. They sat by the fire, listening to the sounds of the crackling wood. It felt wonderful to be warm, fed, and safe, even though their enemies were still not very far away. Paz found herself drifting off to sleep. Pook was already snoring on the hearthrug, and at some point Paz joined him, dimly aware of Bridget covering them both with a patchwork blanket. She tried to say thank you, or to ask one of the many questions that were whizzing around in her head, but the sleepiness was too strong. She let herself fall into it. When she awoke, she saw Bridget sitting on a chair by the stove, holding the magic dagger Starclaw in her hands. She was turning it over thoughtfully, pausing every now and then to peer at the copper face on the hilt. Paz watched her, wondering what to say. She didn't want to appear rude, but seeing Bridget with the dagger made her uneasy, partly because she didn't think she should be touching it, and also because there was a good chance it might slice off her fingers. The old rabbit didn't even look at Paz, but somehow she still knew she was awake. "Powerful magic in this here dagger," she said. "One of the 12 gifts of the goddess, if I'm not mistaken." "How?" Paz began, not knowing whether to admit what Starclaw was. "How do you know that?" "Got one myself." Bridget smiled and pulled the little copper sickle from her belt. When she brought it near the dagger, it flashed blue for an instant. Paz thought she saw Starclaw give an answering twinkle. "How did you get one?" Paz asked. "I thought they were only given to chieftains of the 12 tribes." "They were." Bridget took the sickle away again and looked into the flickering flames of the stove. "I was a princess once. Not that you know it now, of course. I reckon you must be too. My father was the chief of Redwater Warren a long time back now. One of his guard double-crossed him and forced him out. All our family had to leave, cast out of our home like wandering clinkers. I knew about the sickle and decided that lot didn't deserve to have it, so I took it with me. It glows red whenever it's near poison, blue when it's near something good. Taught me all I know about herb crafting and healing, it did." Paz found it hard to imagine the bent old she-rabbit as a princess, sitting at the head table in the Longburrow, or dressed in her finest for the Carrotmas feast at harvest time. "Was it Chief Russet who did that to your family? He always seemed such a friendly rabbit." "Not him, but his father before, the evil two-faced son of a weasel. He was the captain of the honour guard as well. Always too trusting, my old father, and look where it got him. My folks moved on afterwards, but I stayed here in the woods. I watched them turn the warren inside out looking for my sickle, and it was here with me the whole time." She gave a dry chuckle that sounded like a pile of leaves rustling. When she laughed, Paz could see the little girl still inside her, and she found herself smiling too. We will finish that chapter tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.